wrong side of the pond. He is DJ Schweitzer. I am Jeremy Lance. We forgot to do a show last week.
It wasn't so much we forgot. We just kind of ran out of time. And then
Yeah.
I realized I was actually playing my first soccer game in like forever. And
how'd it go?
Yeah.
How dead did you feel afterwards?
So dead. I felt as close to 40 as I've ever felt in my entire life. Definitely super rusty. It did not help that we came out against a team full of like 22-year-olds who were super fit and pretty technical. But hey, I had the match-winning assist. Had 2 assists on the night, so not too bad of an evening after 14 months out from the field. But yeah, it squeezed out any room we really had for a podcast.
Did you see my friend Doug?
Doug was not reffing. For those unfamiliar with the Dayton soccer scene, Doug is a longtime referee in the area who also rotates between Jeremy's Gotham leagues. So I did not have the opportunity to insult Doug as I normally would, and
That's your normal move.
It's been a really long time since I've insulted Doug, so I'm looking forward to the chance to do that.
I know he's been looking forward to the chance of receiving and returning those insults. So
yeah, as a proper referee should. Yeah, that squeezed us out last week, and it was kind of a weird week in terms of soccer too. It was like this lingering after effect of the Super League's kind of ripples. And, the Champions League came into play, and then, MLS had this kind of weird weekend too, and suddenly we're back in the thick of it where, like, this weekend we're going to have one of those weird days where you can watch soccer from, like, 9 a.m. until, like, 11 p.m. all day long, and it's becoming one of those times again where it's almost like soccer overload, where you can't keep track of it all. There's actually so much of it going on.
I can't wait to I think the game, my kids have a game that I have to coach, but it's a makeup game from the beginning of the season. So it got scheduled for 6 p.m.
Woo.
So it's like, all right, I got the whole day to just hang out and watch soccer till like 5 o'clock.
Little dinner time kickoff for the kids, right?
Oh, gotta love it.
Yeah, nothing.
Hopefully they ate before, but like enough before that they're not.
Yeah, not too soon.
Those are always tough because it's like we have that a lot with like lunchtime like kickoffs, and I'm like, all right, I guess have like a little bit of snack or like have lunch at like 10:30.
Oh yeah, it's a difficult one, and definitely not one for children who like are used to a routine of getting meals at certain times. Throw off like a lunch a couple hours, and it just causes chaos in the rest of your day.
I don't want to eat right now. I know you don't want to eat right now, but when you do want to eat, you will be playing soccer, so you have to eat now. I know you're not hungry. Just do it anyways.
Just do it. Force it down your throat. It's all I'm asking you to do here is just force things down your throat that you don't want down there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Got to do it.
Best way to start off a podcast right there with saying like that. Second best way to do that is to lead off with some fantasy updates. I'm sure everyone's looking forward to that.
Yay.
Over into the English League, we're getting down into the nitty-gritty here. 16 shows in a row for Tyler Kelly. It seems pretty likely he's going to wrap up that title. I fell 8 places to 56, joining you down on the second page. You fell 2 places to 89th. There's the English League update. We did pick up some players in the in the MLS League as well. We're now up to 16 whole contestants. Woo! I'm still in last place, which means I fell 2 places. You
Good job.
fell 4 places off the top spots. And now Mike DiPietro, a man who won our league in years past,
right.
His La Vida.
So he's not giving that up.
Nah, his La Vida Locadia, great team name there, supplants your Waukesha Wanderers after one show on top. There's your fantasy update. Let's get into the soccer itself, and let's head to England first, where, as you've set us off, you've asked the great question of can Liverpool and Spurs catch the lead pack? And you're the outsider view here. So let's start with you because I've got the rose-tinted glasses.
No, they can't. All right, moving on. No, actually, I don't know. I think they can. I think they can. Some more than others. You got to look at the schedules. You got to look at who's got what. A team that's in 4th place like Chelsea right now. They have like a really rough like next couple weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in it right now. Like they just played Madrid today. We'll get into that later. It went well. Um, then they'll play Manchester City, a team that they've now just scheduled a new match with later in the month. They'll play them this weekend. Arsenal at the midweek, and then I think they play. I mean, it's just kind of a they have the FA Cup, and then they play Leicester again, and it's kind of I guess I didn't see this coming. I was kind of focused on other teams and if they had like rough ends to the season, and obviously advancing deep into all these cups will do that to you, but like all of a sudden, like Chelsea find themselves in like a really brutal month of May that they have to get through.
Oh yeah.
That's your fourth. I mean, that's like the lead dog that you're trying to chase down. That's that outside of the pack. If you can just pull him away, you can get yourself in. And we're looking as much as we're looking like a very good team, playing very well, playing some world-beating soccer. We're also like totally vulnerable to like let it slip either in the league or I mean we're juggling three balls right now. We can let one of those slip pretty easily.
Yeah, I figured, and I kind of wanted to lead you off here because you're our typical schedule analyst most of the time through, and I did the same thing this week as I actually went through and looked at all the teams that are kind of in this competitive standpoint
Right.
for these last places. And you're right, Chelsea, but you worded it perfectly. Like it all kind of came to a head this week. It's like, oh, season's getting back on track. We got our league spot in good position. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, it all hits like this week. And it's not exactly this week, but it's like the next 3 weeks for you guys is pandemonium. And you're playing City twice. You're playing Leicester twice. Those are 4 matches against teams in the top 4 alone, right? Like that's just
Right.
within that. Arsenal, it's still, they're obviously having their down year, but at the same time,
Right, but they're gonna be up for it.
yeah, absolutely. It's still
They already picked us once. Basically, what was the start to the Lampard downfall back in December, right before Christmas, and that like they're not like as bad as they've been at times this season. They're going to give their absolute all in that match.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like you were saying, it's super easy in any of these fronts, all 3 of them that you're fighting on right now, to just slip up a little bit. And I even look at the easiest match on your schedule right now, and that's the last match of the season against Villa.
Right.
And you normally go like, it's at Villa, they'll be on the beach at that point, like it's not that big of a deal.
They could be fighting for a Europa spot.
Exactly. Like they're in the mix for the Europa League, and so they're obviously going to be up for it. They've been in a little bit of a purple patch at the moment too, so that they seem a little vulnerable. But because they're fighting for it, it's not a game that Chelsea will take off. The only reason why I'd say they might be willing to take that off is the Champions League final is the next week, so there will be a motivation. For Tuchel to rest players, and we know he's a guy who plays these kind of weird like situations in his head where he's like, I need to rest this guy so I can use him as a sub in this match, or like he just goes through these machinations, and it seems like the perfect recipe for a slip up somewhere in there. And I look at that, and now I'm looking at the rest of the people in the mix. And West Ham, they're also kind of in this equation, right? They're sitting in 5th place, just 3 points behind you guys. And they have matches against Everton, Brighton, West Brom, and Southampton. And outside of that Everton match, West Brom are fighting for their life, but that's the second to last game of the season at that point. Like they may be dead.
They'll be dead by then.
Yeah, right. So you look at West Ham's schedule; they've been cleaning up against teams in that neck of the woods, right? Like they win.
They'll get
those
fat
matches.
on them.
So I look at West Ham and go, they're not going to slip. So you need Chelsea to really be the one to slip if you're going to be a Liverpool or Tottenham side that tries or I knew you were going to throw this in.
The team that slipped last year and also has Not exactly an easy road. Leicester City could also slip all the way from third.
Yeah, and they're sitting, right now in 63 points. That's 7 points more than what Spurs have, and 9 points more than what Liverpool have. So it's a long road for them to slip down over a 4-match stretch, but it's not unheard of, and they've lost their last two. So you're right, like that. Those are the doors in, and it's gonna be Leicester or Chelsea. Like I don't see West Ham crapping the bed unless they remember their West Ham in the last couple weeks of the season. And at this point in
Or
the
if
year,
David Moyes remembers he's David Moyes.
yeah, that's possible as well. But yeah, I mean, I look at that and you look at Spurs matches. They're at Leeds versus Wolves versus Aston Villa and at Leicester City. Liverpool have Southampton at United. There's that makeup game which we'll talk about.
Yeah, that just got announced. That'll be this coming Thursday, not this week, but next week.
Yep. And then at West Brom, at Burnley, and then versus Crystal Palace. So they've got that extra match in the bag. And I just with their
but the extra match in the bag is a United team that is actually kind of, even at their strongest, has had their number.
Yeah, exactly. So I think both Spurs and Liverpool have the matches ahead of them that they can pull themselves into that position. I don't think Spurs will. This Spurs team is too flawed and too messed up to probably get it together. But I could see Liverpool remembering, much like West Ham might remember that they're West Ham. Liverpool might remember that they're Liverpool and resurface out of this. But I don't know. While I think it's possible, I think it's highly unlikely that either team actually does it.
Sidebar. I was combing through the betting odds today on what the new outlook is on the Tottenham managerial situation.
Oh God.
It seemed pretty murky, considering the odds-on favorite is the one that logically makes no sense, which is Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah.
He's 6-2 at most betting outfits. He's the odds-on favorite. And then it's a dip down to Wolves manager, Graham Potter, Scotty Parker, Maurizio Sarri. His name's kind of flamed out a little bit, but I think that was actually partly because he was originally thought to be the guy getting the Roma gig. That went to another individual.
Interesting.
So that number might pop back up.
Yeah, weird seeing Mourinho land on his feet so quickly. Very not like Mourinho. He likes to lick his wounds a little bit before he gets back into the game, and
right.
He jumped right back into the fire with Roma, and obviously that rules him out from being hired. Thank God. But yeah, I'll be honest with you. It's a lot of times when Spurs have had these kind of managerial shifts in the past, Levy at least seemed like he had a game plan in mind, right? Here's where we're going. When Pochettino was fired, you knew that someone was already in the wings. That,
right.
There's no way.
Mourinho was at training the next morning.
Yeah, and it was kind of the same way before Pochettino arrived as well. So he's a very deliberate and methodical director, and this one was very clear. They had to get him out because it was going so badly that that was all you could do. And now you look at the equation, especially after their top targets have vanished into thin air. Nagelsmann took the Bayern job, as everyone kind of suspected he might if it was offered to him. And then Erik ten Hag at Ajax was I hear you, Tottenham, but I'm going to just stay at Ajax. And at that point,
I'm going to get this nice extension. Thanks for this extension you've helped me out with.
Right. And those were the two guys that I had circled that I was these are really the only guys that I want. And now that they're gone, we're left with the leftovers. And that's a terrible way of kind of phrasing it. But at the same time, these are the guys that are who maybe it's a good idea to fire your manager and replace them with. And I look through the pack, and the only one that gets me marginally excited is Nuno Espirito Santo. And even then, I'm kind of like, well, like Wolves were hot a year ago.
Right.
And,
They're actually not having a great season this year.
right? Like if you'd been like, we sacked Mourinho last year and hired him, I'd be like, okay, I can get on board with that. But now we're at the point where I'm like, geez, maybe we're going to have to turn back to Tim Sherwood or something.
Is Graham Potter the new Tim Sherwood?
I mean, I'm trying to convince myself that Graham Potter is even a sexy pick, right? Like, oh,
People, I saw a couple articles trying to do that today.
Like, oh, he's done some great stuff at Brighton, and it's kind of like, wait a minute, we're replacing our manager with Brighton's coach? Like, come on, like we went from Champions League final to hiring Brighton's manager, and that's not really a diss. Like, obviously we
Life
hired.
comes at you fast.
Oh God, it really does. But like, Pochettino was that type of manager when we hired him away from Southampton, right?
Sure,
So,
but Southampton was like the hunt for like European places and punching way above their weight.
Yeah, exactly. So, Wolves were certainly doing that to a certain extent, but they've come back down to earth a little bit, and that makes that pick look a little less appealing than it might have a year ago. So no, I'm sweating it right now, to be honest. Like at this point, I'm kind of going, well, dang, maybe we just ride out Ryan Mason until like a proper manager becomes available. But who knows how long that actually will be.
They had thrown something out that they wanted to get this done like really quickly. That didn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Like you have the Euros here in a couple months. Like the logical move is you wait for the Euros to end and like some solid manager for some national team is going to have like a rough outing, or it's just going to be like the end of the cycle for him. And they're going to be looking for, and I feel like that'll be a better move, right?
I mean, to be honest, I think therein lies maybe the best possible answer. I was kind of thinking like maybe Gareth Southgate will get tired of the England gig after the Euros, and maybe.
So you basically got to hope that the Euros don't really go well for England then, right? Is that what you want, or do you want it to go well?
Maybe I want.
But then he stays, right?
Yeah, maybe like he's like, I've accomplished what I can here, and I want to move on to the club game.
So they win it all. They win the Euros. Then he takes the Spurs gig.
Then it seems like the perfect choice. We're getting the European champion manager, right? No.
And then he's won over Harry Kane, and Harry Kane's like, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, I'd love to stay here and hang out with Gareth. This sounds great.
We're gonna get just matching vests.
Oh man, I just like you bring up the Kane situation, and it just
whoever takes this gig has a potential mess on their hands, right?
Oh God, like it's not just we lost against Manchester City in the Caribou Cup, the Caribou Coffee Cup final, and I watch a guy like Heung-min Son walking around the pitch crying, and he's the type of player who cries, right? Like that's not a bad thing. I'm not besmirching him for doing so. But then I'm reading into those tears like way more than I normally would. And I'm like, is he crying because he knows this is like the last hurrah for the squad and it's all going to get busted up after the season? And like, oh my God, we don't have
this was their last chance to get silverware, this era of Spurs.
Yeah. And that's the point I find myself at with this Tottenham situation. And it's been like such an up and down this year, like starting the year as a title contender, quickly crashed into the basement, elated that we fired Mourinho, to suddenly despair that we don't actually have any true managerial candidates and our best players are likely heading out the door. And it's just kind of like, oh crap, holy crap. Like we went from top of the world to like doldrums in the fastest way ever. And it's very Spursy, but it's also a lot bigger swings that I'm like used to from the last 20 years in conditioning from following the squad.
Well, that sounds fun. I wish you luck.
Thanks. Optimism low.
Let's just whip around the EPL real quick. I don't know. I wrote this down, and then it's like I don't even know what matches I want to mention. I mean, the only match really to mention is the one that didn't even get to happen.
We've not had a chance to talk about this yet. Manchester United and Liverpool didn't actually play this weekend. They were scheduled to do so at Old Trafford, one of the biggest derby matches in English football. didn't happen because the fans who weren't allowed into the game were so riotous outside that
It's
the
good to have
officials,
fans back.
yeah, right. They're not even back yet, and they're already getting matches suspended. Amazing stuff, honestly, in Manchester. But you look at the situation, and these are purely protests against the Glazers, who are the owners of Manchester United, and their move towards the Super League. And everyone keeps pinning this on the Super League, and it's so much bigger than that. If you're
Right.
not,
The Glazer out stuff predates this by years.
it pretty much predates the Glazers actually owning the team. Like people were adamantly against this from the get-go. You know, if you're not kind of familiar with the timeline for this, Manchester United not all that long ago was actually a publicly traded company. Like they were on the stock exchange, and the Glazers went and sucked up a bunch of the stock and ultimately forced a takeover and bought out the majority of the shares. And they did so by leveraging loads of debt on the club, like catastrophic amounts of debt, so much so that they went from being like the team that sets the transfer market worldwide to being like kind of like an average player. And that seems like, you know, oh, poor rich people being marginally not rich anymore. But it's also like it changed the schematic of the club and their reputation and their trajectory. And for a group of fans who are very used to winning everything,
Uh-huh.
like the United fans very quickly did not take to this well. And they've been on this train literally since day one. And I think it was like the second year that the Glazers own the team that, what is it, FC United of Manchester,
Yep.
this like non-Phoenix club that was birthed out of Manchester from fans who wanted to hold, you know, the traditions and values of the fan-centric model at the center of the club. That was like the second year. So it's been so long going, and people who are newer to the sport may be quick to be like, oh, everyone's mad about the Super League. The Super League's just the icing on the cake for
Right.
what's going on with United.
There's a recency bias in the way that a lot of this story is being portrayed. Because then you'll even have the other end of things, like you'll hear reports in America like talk about this, and like you can almost hear the confusion in that owner of like, or in that reporter's like voice of like, oh, the Glazers, like they're great, like the Glazers have been a good NFL owner for upwards of a year. Their NFL team has also been garbage for pretty much the entire time they've owned the team, except for last year. So like, there's even a recency bias of like people acting as if like they're good sports owners. It's like that's not even a thing at all.
Well, I mean, that's like hashtag 24-hour news cycle if I've ever seen it.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I think what this really underlines is just how big of a dichotomy there is between American professional sports and the soccer model, at least as far as Europe is concerned. And I think that what we're finally seeing is like the European fans have like reached their fill of like American mindset and pursuit of, you know, profit over sporting merit and blah blah blah. I think they're finally reaching their breaking point where they're like, hey, look, we've tolerated this for a while, and now
Right.
we're like, you guys have pushed it a bit too far. And I think this is like them maybe having a bit of a reckoning, not necessarily the fans, but the owners coming to the realization that like that's not how stuff works over
Right.
here.
They can't
And
operate it the way that you operate an American franchise. And you have, yeah, obviously the three big American owners. And to be fair, you know, Liverpool up until the Super League incident has skated by, or at least this current ownership group, I should say, because the Gillette ownership before it was a bad scene. John Henry's ownership, Fenway Sports Group ownership, has skated by up until the Super League because they were building the club up and bringing in exciting managers, and obviously it led to then a Champions League title and a league title, where you have United and Arsenal, two owners that, I mean, things have kind of gone, especially in United's case, like gone in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't want to give Liverpool's owners Fenway Sports Group too big of a pass here. They were actually kind of like the driving force behind that project big picture with the Premier
Yeah,
League.
no, they were.
Restructure all that. And I think there has been a growing bit of discontent within that fan base despite all their success. Liverpool fans are weird. Like they get it all and then they're pissed off about it, even though they've been moaning about wanting that forever. It's a weird spot, and I'd love to say that I wouldn't do the same thing if I were in their position. I probably would, but
they're elitist Puritans, but it's fine.
Yeah. But I do think that like now everyone's like the sheep, the wool's been pulled over the eye or away from our eyes, and now we can see what's actually going on a little bit. And for American fans who are used to this setup and mindset, it's really not that weird. In fact, I remember like seeing a lot of newer fans in the reaction to the European Super League thing kind of being like, why wouldn't we all want this? Like, it sounds great. And I think it's like the longer you've been exposed to how European soccer works, you kind of get that idea into your head that's like, nah,
Yeah.
that's just not really what it should be. And I don't know. It's for once I'm told like I don't think there's any way to side and be like, well, here's where the owners have it right. Like you know what I mean? Like I don't think there's a way that you can really justify it this time around. And I'm really intrigued to know if the fans are going to keep at it. Like that's what I really want to see. Are they going to do this again on Thursday?
Right. Like, is United going to be able to host a home match for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd love it if they didn't. You know what I mean? Like I think that would be a cool statement. But
I'd love it if they had to forfeit those matches, and then they're the team that falls out.
Yeah, there's a solution we didn't consider. Yeah, it's a wild situation. But man, the scenes at Old Trafford were nuts. I mean, I saw a video of a policeman punching a fan on the ground who they'd detained, and there was talk of fans attacking and throwing stuff at the police, and no one obviously wants to advocate for violence, but man, after a year of pandemic and don't screw with people's football, like that's the last thing that anyone's going to tolerate.
That's all I got. So people did screw with the football at United, so the United fans did storm the stadium, like broke entrances, shattered like doors, like glass doors to get into the stadium, wrecked their way in, ran all over the tarps and stuff like that.
This is the people's house. It's the people's house, right? Isn't that the chant? I'm sure that was the chant.
Yeah. They were just singing that song from Les Mis. That Do You Hear the People Sing?
Bunch of red hats.
They were just they started also taking it out of the media. Did you see that there was like the one guy that was like throwing a guy's tripod around? It's like I don't think the tripod was the reason the Super League almost happened. Like I'm pretty sure the tripod is innocent in this one.
Yeah, I saw that one too, and it did feel, and I keep desperately trying to make jokes back to making this into a January 6th insurrection comparison, but that was the one that really put me over the edge, where I'm like, is this guy really trying to just be a MAGA impersonator right now? Is that
right.
Is that what's going down?
The lamestream media needs to be taken out, right?
Yeah, they're the ones behind all this soccer shenanigans. Although, Sky, what did you do? Anyway, let's move away from that.
Hey, maybe it was a DAZN camera.
Ooh.
Now, if it was a DAZN tripod, then you're onto something, because they were in on the Super League.
That's true. Now you're getting into conspiracy theory
stuff. Take that, DAZN.
I know this is feeling more and more like insurrection territory. Ugh, delicious. The only other Premier League note that I had was West Brom. You're pretty much dead. I was looking through this mathematically. They're not like out officially yet, but They need to win all of their remaining matches and either have Newcastle lose all of theirs or have Burnley
Possible.
lose all of theirs.
Possible.
It's literally the only two scenarios that make it work. Newcastle haven't lost in their last four, so that seems kind of unlikely. Burnley haven't won in three, so if it's going to happen, that's where it is. But I don't see West Brom winning all of their matches. They've won two in a row, but like that's their longest winning streak of the season. So
I shed no tears for West Brom going down.
I don't either.
They
And I
come
don't
back
even,
every year with a boring brand of football. Their kits are always crap. I know this is like an American perspective. Like I care nothing for the history of what West Brom is and what it means to that community. Like, don't care. You bore me. Goodbye.
just replacing them with the other West Brom, which is Norwich. Sorry, Charlie.
Yeah. Where they destroy the championship only to come up and get immediately relegated in 20th place.
Yeah, can't wait to see the next Saito Berahino come out of that setup. But no, it seems really unlikely that they're going to pull themselves out of it at this point. Let's go from the lows of the Premier League now and move over to the highs of the Champions League.
Heyo.
Yeah, and I see you catching a high over there just thinking about it. Back into a Champions League final for Chelsea where they'll face off against English opposition in Manchester City, as we talked about earlier. The first all-English final in the European Championship since 2019 when Liverpool.
Yeah, I was going to say, you'll have to go all the way back to 2 years ago.
Yeah. Other than that, though, it has been a while. Like before those two, we got used to this for a little bit in the the early to mid 2010 areas, but yeah, it's
well, 08 when Chelsea was in it again. That was an all England final. That was where they lost to United when John Terry slipped.
Yep. Great moment in sports.
There's already jokes about people want John Terry to show up in a full kit.
Oh God, I hope so. I hope so. Aston Villa will give him the day off. Like, go ahead, John. Put on.
Their season will be over by then.
Put on all the blues and go suit up. You can even slip in the shin guards if you need to. Yeah, I'd be all for that. It is kind of ironic. I do really love the irony of a Champions League final that's composed of teams that really pushed for the European Super League. It's just
it could have been worse.
Instead
of the two teams least interested yet ultimately went along with it, it could have been Real Madrid in that final, and it could have been one of the architects of the Super League.
Yeah, that's true.
Whose owner or president or whatever is still talking about the Super League as if it's in the present tense.
He's staring down the barrel of a 2-year European ban right now if he doesn't stop talking about it.
Good luck to him.
Yeah, good luck with that. But no, let's get back to this final. I talk about the irony of these being super clubs. I do, like, everyone's tripping over themselves, be like, oh, City finally making this final. They spent $2 billion to get here.
Like, it's not. Well, yeah, I mean, it's felt this way for a few years now that, like, yeah, you better get to the final.
Yeah.
Like, kind of, and I think that's even how Pep Guardiola and the board probably perceive it at this point. This is the goal. The final's the goal. Winning the Champions League is the goal. Everything else is failure.
Yeah, I mean, those are the goals, but it was funny hearing Pep in the press today talk, in the post-match press conferences. I think it was either today or yesterday. He was talking specifically about, people put all these expectations on us. Like, it's difficult to make it here. Sometimes you need luck and chance to make it here, which is totally true, right? Like, you mentioned the John Terry slip earlier. Like, Manchester United won their last Champions League title because John Terry slipped. Like, that right. had a large part to do with it. And that luck is a big thing. But, like, when you spend $2 billion to get here, like, you have to stop talking about luck. Like, that's so much more than, like, I think Madrid has spent like $1 billion in that time frame, which is still an absurd amount of money. But, like, that's the closest competitor. When you've doubled the closest competitor in your spend, like you two are so far and away bigger than everyone else, that's when you have to start talking about like, hey, the game is broken, and like we're watching these new Champions League reforms supposedly coming in a couple of years, and they suit the big clubs just as much as the Super League did
Sure.
to a certain extent. And you start looking at this and go like, wait a minute, like the system is broken. And I can't remember who it was who said it, but you look at these four teams that were in the Champions League final, like Chelsea were what City were before they were City, right? Like
Sure.
Chelsea changed the game in market manipulation. Like Madrid and Manchester United were like the ones that were guiding, high fees. Maybe it was Juventus would dabble in that from time to time. But then like Chelsea came in and were like, wait a minute, we're just gonna spend money like it doesn't matter anymore. And that changed the game, and all the big clubs caught up with that. And then City came in and were like, we're gonna double down on that system. And that you see those two making the final. Then you look at Madrid, who've been this long-term manipulator, and PSG, who are like the other club who are juicing the system too.
Well, yeah, you have City and PSG in the one semifinal, two clubs that were hit with and ultimately punished in no real way with financial fair play violations
Oh, for sure.
last several years.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at Chelsea have been hit for, with transfer bans over their manipulations of the system in multiple circumstances, right? It's not just once, it's been twice in the last 10 years. And I'm not trying to single out Chelsea, but you look more and more at the teams that are in these situations, and especially when you're talking about City, who spent just astronomical sums, and you do have to go like the fans have a point. What are we watching here? Like, yeah, we're fighting for all this and we're all happy the Super League's dead, but these four teams and these two teams are still the exact same system that we were so opposed to a month ago.
But financially, how does that get fixed, right? Like,
Um,
how do you put the toothpaste back in the tube of the levels of money that the typical big name player of the moment is expecting to go for on the market?
you can't, right? Like
Right?
that's the problem.
Like
Like
it perpetuates itself, right? Like there's no stopping it.
yeah, I mean, you think about it this way, like we talk about the City and PSG ownership groups. Their owners are murderers. Like they off people that they don't like. Like it's everyone knows it happens. You can't force people like that out of the game. They're the richest people on the planet. Like billionaires don't they unless they want to go, they don't go. Like
Right.
that's the thing. Like there's this big talk about how the owner of Spotify is going to try to force out, a takeover at Arsenal, and they're just going, we're not interested in selling because
Yeah.
we're printing money over here and we have no interest in getting rid of this
Same thing at
asset.
United. You had all these reporters hounding one of the weirdo Glazers this week, and like he was just ignoring them because it's like he literally does not have to. The cries can be as loud as they want to be, but when you're that wealthy, you don't have to listen.
Yeah.
You don't have to listen. You can ignore it and just keep going.
Yeah. So I mean, who knows? I mean, it's a pipe dream to say like you'll be able to contain any of this. Some sort of change has to happen. But it
I
doesn't
mean,
mean
you'd have to bring in pretty big regulations that would ultimately be like opposed. The Super League was opposed by the players. If you were to bring in a lot of these regulations, it would affect how much money players can make, and therefore the players would then not be on the side of that.
yeah. Like like the easy answer here, the easiest answer, salary cap. Like
Sure.
that's the answer. But the
Gam
players,
and Tam, and then
yeah, right. And Garber Bucks and discovery rights and super drafts, right? Like that's the way that we fix all this. Um, I don't, but the players are going to be adamantly opposed to a salary cap because they don't want to get paid less. Like Erling Haaland isn't asking for less money than what he's making at Dortmund.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, I don't know. I think this final is one that should. I really hope that the media really keeps that spotlight on that discussion in the wake of what's happened at Manchester United this past week, and all the revolts that have kind of sprung up across Europe in response to the Super League. Like I want that to be the continued narrative here, but it also doesn't mean that we can't enjoy this match. Like you're a Chelsea fan, like you should enjoy this match. Like this.
Oh, I won't.
Yeah, it'll be terrible.
It'll be absolute anxiety for the entire time.
Yeah.
I'll be watching it from behind the couch.
Yeah, right. Like looking over the edge. Well, here's what I'm excited about. Like,
yeah, should we have possession?
We might be able to go somewhere for this Champions League final. You know what I mean? Like that's an exciting thing to think about, right?
That's always a good thing.
As two vaccinated individuals, we could go to a common location and sit in relatively close quarters and imbibe in beverages. Like that's something that people haven't been able to do in a long time. So that seems exciting.
I'm a fan.
Yeah. Another thing that's exciting about this final, Christian Pulisic. Can we get back on that board?
Well, I was joking about this the other day. Like, it was just yesterday that the U.S. soccer media was having a meltdown. That Pulisic's time at Chelsea has been a disaster. He needs to leave. Tuchel doesn't want him there. He has to leave. He has to leave this summer. He was even being asked, and he was even like, I don't know. Maybe I do have to kind of reassess my situation. Fast forward to, I don't know, like 2 weeks later, and he's back in business and pretty much, been a part of everything. He didn't start today, but like he comes on, he contributes. He started the first leg, he scores that goal. Like he's back in the frame to the point where it's like, I'm not even thinking about the whole like, oh, is this working out here for him? Is this going to be a good idea?
Yeah, Tuchel makes it difficult too, right? Like he's not and he does this everywhere he goes. Like he's not a consistent lineup guy, and so especially for like
funny at Chelsea, because like the last couple managers, that's been like one of the biggest knocks is like these guys don't rotate the squad, and then like Tuchel comes in, it's like, hey, could you chill out on the squad rotation, bud?
For real.
We need some consistency.
Yeah, and especially for like an American soccer media that's very like, here's what's happening today and the ramifications of it that will last forever. And so like the minute that he gets rotated out of the squad, everyone's throwing up red flags. Like literally today, he wasn't in the squad.
An indictment on the future of American soccer.
Oh, for sure. And today he wasn't named in the Chelsea squad, and like everyone immediately was like, what is going on? And admittedly, it was a little weird, right? Like,
yeah, I saw it and I was like, oh, we do like, I mean, I guess we technically don't need to score a goal, but like we'll probably need to.
Right. And you do like wonder a little bit what's going on, but then Tuchel ends up looking like a genius as he comes off the bench and is a
huge impact immediately.
Immediate spark. Like was arguably one of the best players on the pitch.
Well, and you could tell like Tuchel timed it perfect. Like it worked exactly how he wanted to. By the time Pulisic came on, so much of that Madrid side was beyond frustrated, was a little haggard, and like starting to like they were just kind of gripping a little bit. They were were kind of taking up. And here you bring on Pulisic, old DJ Fresh Legs, just running out there, just screaming past everybody and like dancing around and doing all the stuff, and like you could tell like that Madrid side, like that was the last thing they wanted to like go up against at that moment.
I'm assuming that was DJ Fresh Legs was a reference to me returning to the soccer pitch and coming out.
Exactly. That was you on Thursday, right? You were DJ Fresh Legs.
Yeah.
And then 5 minutes later, you were DJ needs a sub.
Yeah, less than 5 for sure.
DJ's going to pitcher of beer.
Yeah, for real. That was what I was there for anyway. All that said, listen, first American to score in a Champions League semifinal. We didn't record last week, so we didn't get a chance to talk about that. That's super freaking cool.
Yeah.
Then he becomes the first American to assist in the Champions League final in this leg. And
I believe he was the youngest Champions League player to have a goal and an assist in a semifinal.
seems pretty cool.
But I mean, the crazy thing is, so he makes it to this final against a City side that absolutely handled PSG. While Zach Steffen is unlikely to see the field, an American will walk away a Champions League winner at the end of this match.
That's the coolest part of this match, right? Like, especially for me who hates both these teams. They're like, I'm looking for a silver lining in here, and I tweeted out today, like, I wish there was a way for both City and Chelsea to lose, but for Pulisic to still win. And like the fact that either one of them will walk away with a medal is like, that's cool stuff. Like that is really cool. And you were talking about, like, it wasn't long ago that we were all worried about Pulisic's future and like where would he end up. And I loved watching people talk about, like, oh, he's gonna end up at somewhere like West Brom. Like guys, he's not a West Brom caliber player. Like, even if he were to fall, he'd be going to like an Everton or like a bubbling upside, a Leicester. And
even that would be like an insane get for Everton.
Yeah, right. So I think everyone needs to put their perspective goggles back on a little bit here and enjoy this. And, for those of us who don't like either team, or for you who will be a nervous wreck throughout most of the match, there's something to look forward to out of this. And, even though it's two mega rich clubs, I'm still pretty excited about the final, right? Like, there's stuff to look forward to in it.
When was the last time it wasn't two mega rich clubs? I'll hang up and listen to your answer.
I mean, I'm going to have to Google this because there's no
way. I don't know. Is Ajax considered mega rich? I guess we could maybe throw them in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, you could talk about them.
Their team is a little more genuine and pure, right?
Yeah, sure. I think the one that springs to mind for me is Marseille. Like, that's probably the last team that wasn't like a mega rich club, but one.
Was that like 04? What?
Right. I'm literally, I just pulled up the like list and I'm looking back through this to like go to the last not big club that made it. Marseille is probably it, but at the time they were a rich club. Like, and
sure.
In the aftermath of all that, we've come to find that they were actually like really gaming the system and being super
corrupt,
shady.
Actually.
So I mean, major clubs pretty much only make it to the final now. Like, I'm looking back.
Nottingham Forest in like 75 or whatever.
Sampdoria from Italy made the final in the 91-92 season. And that, I think, is realistically like the last club that I'm even comfortable putting in that territory. You can also, Marseille was the year before that. Benfica, Steaua Bucharest from Romania made the final in 88-89. So like, that's how far back you have to go to really get into the territory of like.
That's when they were spending a currency that probably doesn't even exist anymore.
Right? I mean, shoot. Romania is barely even a country anymore. I'm kidding, people who are from Romania. I'm sorry, you guys have been in a country for a long time.
It's DJ at wrong side of. I'm just gonna sip bourbon. You're gonna have to edit this part out. I had nothing there. I went to go take a sip, and then I looked up. I was like, he's gone.
Yeah, I noticed my computer was about to die, and I was like, oh crap, I hope I can get out of here, and I didn't. So, all right. Yeah, we only get super clubs anymore. But hey, let's enjoy the Champions League final. I'm sure you won't, but hey, if you win it, then you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I'm thinking back to 2012, and like, I was miserable the whole match. Got excited when Drogba got the equalizer, but then I was like, oh man, that means I have to sit through 30 more minutes of this.
Yeah, it's
of this hell on earth.
here's what's weird about that. I think back to that, Chelsea side, and that side was very defined by stars. Drogba, Terry, Lampard, Czech, Ashley Cole, right? Like these are
Ryan Bertrand, uh, Jose Basingua.
I forgot that Bertrand started that match.
He started the match.
That's mind blowing stuff.
So did Basingua.
That's also pretty crazy. But then I think to this Chelsea side, and it's like I don't want to say it's devoid of stars, but it feels such a different team. You know what I mean? Like it's not a team that's like, here's your nucleus. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, you mentioned it. Like that 2012 team had that Mourinho spine that was built in. And it was like their last hurrah, right? Because like right after that, like that Drogba left the club. He would later come back like 2 years later. Lampard was getting old. Terry was getting old. Czech was like that group there only lasted a couple more seasons, and then they started to fade out. It's interesting because there are some similarities between this Chelsea side and the 2012 Chelsea side, just in like how everything went down this season, right? Like, in 2012, they ended up finishing that season in 6th place. You'll know that because you lost your Champions League spot.
I recall.
So it was kind of a rough season in the league. And while they're currently in 4th place, it's been a rough season in the league for them. They've spent a lot of time this season outside the top 4. You had in 2012 a managerial change after the new year, in that second half of the season. You had that happen here too. In 2012, they beat a Portuguese side in the quarterfinals and a Spanish side in the semifinals. That was the same here. Two different Portuguese and Spanish sides, but the same sequence nonetheless.
Draw those conclusions.
The goal that helped get them over the line in that second leg of the semifinal in 2012, one of the most famous goals in Chelsea history, was scored by that season's biggest flop, Fernando Torres. And who scored today? Who scored that first goal today?
Oh, that's delicious.
This season's biggest flop, Timo Werner.
That's delicious stuff right there.
Two guys that spent that whole season, respectively, missing sitter after sitter after sitter.
Yeah. Admittedly, I think Werner's had a better season at Chelsea than what I think Torres had at Chelsea that year, for sure.
Sure.
But all that
that's
said,
a low bar.
Yeah, that's a good comparison though to make. So exciting stuff to look forward to for the final. Hopefully we can enjoy it together. That's what I'm looking forward to.
I don't know. Last time we got together for a final, it didn't end well for any of us. So.
Yeah, it's true. That was on my side of it, at least last time. So, let's move over into domestic matters. MLS is going. It's been wild. Champions League. I need to touch on that real quickly from a CONCACAF perspective. We had 5 MLS teams in the quarterfinals, and
how many we left with?
We're down to 1. Classic MLS move right there.
That changed rapidly.
It really did, but very on brand. Which if nothing else.
And honestly, like the whole group of those 5 teams, if you told me, hey, which team do you think is least likely to be good enough to like win a final? Yeah, I don't know about the Union. They just don't have that big star that you can just rely on for that big moment. I'm gonna go with them. Oh, that's the one team that's left? Okay.
Oh, good. Not to mention that like the Union only were the MLS team that advanced because like they were also facing another MLS team.
Right.
Which makes that kind of terrible. Yeah, that's a bad showing from an MLS perspective, but hey, MLS, it's back.
It looked like a
MLS
really good showing for about 2 seconds there.
Yeah, it really was.
Look at all these teams. They're housing everybody. And then we all remembered how this story always goes, which is I was telling my coworker today, like, you got to blow out your opponent in your home leg and then just survive that away leg.
Yep.
Well, nobody chose to do that. In fact, if you're Toronto, you chose to just get your head handed to you in that first leg. So like the Crew, which was like everybody's like, if anybody can do it, it's the Crew. They're so stacked. They're a perfectly built team. They can do it. They can do it. They drew 2-2 at home, and that was basically their death knell. Like, it didn't matter what happened tonight.
The away goals were already their death knell.
You knew the second that game went down to Monterey, things were not going to go well. So you needed to just build that buffer in that home leg. Like, you needed to win 4 or 5-0 at home.
I'm starting to wonder.
You're losing 3-0 away.
Here's the thing. American teams, and it's not just like our club teams, it's also our national team too. We cannot perform in Mexico. Like it doesn't happen. There's so few wins, goals, victories, draws, anything.
Do we just need to go in and just kind of almost have like a hockey style enforce rule and be like, hey, we're just going to be dirtier than them though. So like, hey, you in the first 10 minutes just punch somebody straight in the dick. Just clear as can be. Take a red if you have to. I don't care. Yeah. Just set the tone early. Like, we will murder you.
Yeah.
We're the bad guys. We're the guys that are just going to start fighting you and dirty tackling you, and CONCACAF's going to do nothing about it. We're going to CONCACAF you.
Oh man, I like that, which is way like more realistic than what my proposition here was, which was maybe Mexico is American soccer kryptonite, and like we just aren't actually capable of producing at that level because there's something that's radiating from the ground that prevents American success in Mexico. Like I'm moving into the realm of supernatural because I'm starting to think.
But honestly, though, there's something to that, though. I think there is such an ingrained like psyche thing going on that like, oh, these matches in Mexico, they're matches, the ref's not going to give you anything, and it's going to be dirty challenges, and it's a hostile environment. And I think like some of that stuff is like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like,
for sure. But there's been enough guys too that have played in both leagues now that you have to wonder, like, wouldn't you guys be used to that by now? I do think, and I honestly think this is something that people don't factor in enough. I think altitude factors in a lot of the time. People don't really realize how high up a lot of the towns and cities are, unless it's one of the coastal cities. But all that said, like we can't keep making these excuses. It needs to be some sort of, like, it consistently happens so much that like at some point we have to go like, we're gonna have to shake up maybe the system in order to get different results. Jonathan Tannenwald from the Inquirer in Philadelphia tweeted this out, and I think he tweets it out like every year when this happens. It's like the minute that American soccer owners want to take the Champions League seriously, like, we'll know it. And it's such a sussant point. Like, I don't think the American owners care. I think the teams care. The coaches care. They want to do it now. Like a couple of years ago, you could accuse MLS coaches of not giving a shit about the CONCACAF Champions League anymore. But now I think they actually care and want to do well. But I don't think the owners care about that at all. Like, I just don't think that's on their radar or even a concern.
No, I mean, think about it. I mean, what is the Champions League still lacking? Good TV rights money, attendance. I mean, attendance is crap.
Yeah.
You can be in a semifinal match. You're going to have like 8,000 people show up if you're lucky on a Tuesday night.
COVID sparing us embarrassment out here in the Champions League.
Exactly.
But no, I mean, I think that's part of it too. Like, there's just not a whole lot of money in CONCACAF that's not getting siphoned off into people's pockets. And frankly, until like there's a real cash prize on the line, no one's gonna care. Like I think that's part of the reason that it is what it is. And
Yeah.
but I think like if MLS and owners and as a structure desired the Champions League as much as maybe the fans and the players do, maybe we would see some sort of traction in that department. But who knows?
The other topic, stateside topic. I got to tour the new TQL stadium here in Cincinnati.
Ooh, still rough saying that name, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like just weird. TQL, like that. Just that name doesn't roll off the tongue, and then like you immediately think about like that company, and you're like, oh, that place sucks.
Yeah, if you're not from Cincinnati, they are a trucking logistics company.
Yeah.
That are basically known for churning and burning through employees in a way that is highly unethical.
Yeah, I mean, it's your typical like straight out of the movies, like high pressured, cold calling sales gig is like 80% of that company. And it's also like, and I made the joke about it on Twitter, is like so many people that was like their first gig out of college.
Mm-hmm.
Because they'll hire you straight out of college.
No experience necessary.
And I've known some people that like that's just they live for that kind of like adrenaline rush, and like they get it, and like those dudes make bank.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Bank. Like, I mean, they are like though the guys at like the mythical guys at the top of like the pyramid scheme that like yeah they hustle like crazy, but they hey they make bank. But the overwhelming majority, much like pyramid schemes, the overwhelming majority of people that go there, like, it doesn't go well. It's a terrible experience, and they get run out of there within like 3 months.
Yeah. So good naming partner, but hey, take the money, do what you got to do. I'm not gonna
that cash will spend.
Yeah,
do your thing.
For sure. Doesn't matter where it comes from for the most part.
So visited the stadium. It was amazing. It was breathtaking. It was everything I wanted that stadium to be. It was literally surreal. Like moments, I would just sit there in the stadium and like have to tell myself like, I'm in Cincinnati. Like it took me 15 minutes to drive here, like to the stadium. Like this is like literally the geographical location of where I'm standing is where I used to run 7v7 leagues and where we used to call NPSL games. It was awesome. It was amazing. Everything about that stadium is top class. If you are, the seats are right on top of the thing. There's not a bad seat in the house. That's like a, cliched thing, but that's so true with this stadium. It's unreal, beautiful, gorgeous. Opens next week. And I just feel deflated because, DJ, this team is absolute garbage still. Somehow, with all those transfers this summer, with all the hype, with all the excitement, still absolute hot trash.
Yeah. It was funny. After the first match of the season where they drew Nashville 2-2, they went up 2-0 instead of that opening 12 minutes. And, FCC Twitter was at peak, right? Like, probably the highest point I'd seen it in a long time.
They had scored 1/6 of their entire total of 2020.
Yeah.
Those opening 12 minutes.
Which is exciting stuff. The ensuing 258 minutes they've played since then have resulted in 0 goals for them and 10 for their opposition. That's in 3 matches that they've conceded those 10 goals, which is, by most accounts, really bad and kind of back in the exact situation they were in last year, producing little and allowing way too much. After that first match, they got outshot an absurd, like it was 31-7 or 32-7. And
Shlebanovsov Teton had a franchise or club high record of saves, in a match. I mean, he had to absolutely stand on his head to keep that team treading water for most of that match.
Right. And I tweeted after the match, like, hey, that opening 12 minutes was great. Lots of positive signs from an attacking perspective, which seems a little naive in the ensuing matches that have followed. But I also tweeted out, like, hey, the amount of shots they gave up is really concerning. And I got some pushback from a few fans, like, hey, what are you trying to say here? And I was like, well, what I'm trying to say here is, like, that's concerning. And you look at the next three matches, they've given up 75 shots and have only taken 27. That's not even looking at your on targets. 75 shots in three matches is an absurd number to give up, like at any rate. And 27 is a really low total. It's less than 10 shots a match. Like that output is also very concerning. I understand Lucho Acosta has been hurt, but there are some really odd questions you have to ask of what's going on in this squad, where people are being played, why they didn't appropriately address their center back situation. I know, their new signing has just been cleared from COVID waivers. He's likely to take part next weekend when they resume play again, given that they've got to bye this weekend. There are just, now that the gloss of those big signings has been peeled away, the goals they both scored in the opening couple minutes, now that that's all happened, everything else has been exposed again.
Yeah,
like, the defense is still really bad, and even if Van der Werf coming back to full fitness and this new center back, if he hits the ground running, like that alone isn't going to solve giving up 27 shots. 27 shots don't come just from the back four. They come from the midfield too. And that midfield, I think, is really like the root of where everything's going wrong, right? Like you got a guy who's playing as a holding mid who literally has never played there before.
Yeah, he's a winger.
And he's in his 30s. It's not like we're taking Swiss Army knife James Milner and twisting him around to put him in the right, in the place that he's probably played 50 other times. This is a guy who's an attacking player who's mostly played as a winger, sometimes as an attacking center mid. And you're asking him to play defensive role in front of a back line that is garbage. That's where you start going like, what is happening here? And what really blows my mind the most is Jaap Stam is like a world-renowned defender.
Yeah. Probably one of the best the Premier League ever saw.
And I know he's not the one who's making the signings here. But if it were my team, and I'm not at all implying that I'm a better coach than Jaap Stam, because I'm not, but I'm a defender as well. And the thing that bothers me the most when I'm coaching is when my team's giving up a gajillion goals. If we're not scoring, I can live with that. But if we're giving up a boatload, that's where I'm freaking out a little bit. And I don't feel like I'm seeing tweaking that fixes things with the setup that you have and the players you have available to you. And that's where I really start feeling like, ooh, this could be a little bit of a false dawn.
Yeah, I think part of my frustration lately has been like, not only is the construction of this roster still questionable, even with all the great pieces they brought in, still super questionable. It's this constant game plan as far as how we address this roster build. You look at around the league, you look at Austin FC, who's had a decent start so far, and first few matches into a league, we've seen, and obviously Cincinnati have decent starts.
Mm-hmm.
I look at Nashville, how they're still playing as well as they did last year. There's no sophomore slump yet. I look at some of the other smaller market MLS teams, and I just see like there are all of these just random domestic MLS dudes that these clubs pick up for not a ton of money, and they play and they're effective at their position. But those guys, like, that's not who That's not how we build a roster here in Cincinnati, right?
Mm-mm.
Everything is we're gonna bring somebody from. We're gonna make this international move. We're gonna go over to Europe or to South America or to wherever, and we're gonna bring this player in. And it's like, okay, so you're gonna bring a player in that you're gonna overpay for. Then you have to get an international spot to get them on. So that's a subsequent move that has to go with it. That also generally involves spending money or moving on another player. And it's like this is the way that this has been continually constructed, and it's like these are easy errors that everyone sees, but this is the way we've decided we're going to do things right now in Cincinnati with our current leadership.
Well, it's wild. There was a lot of talk about how FCC, when they were coming into MLS, had learned the lessons of these other smaller market teams that had struggled out of the gates with expansion, namely Orlando and Minnesota,
Right.
specifically places that the club went to learn from those
I'd give my
mistakes.
right arm to have any of those rosters right now, by the way.
Um, and they rightly did struggle, and neither one of them have found true success yet, but they've gotten over the hump, and I see no signs at all that they've learned technical and soccer lessons from those exposures. There doesn't appear to be any sort of like thought process into how the domestic side of the game is an important part of the equation here. Almost all these MLS teams that are successful, they have, flashy foreign components, but a core or a nucleus or a backbone that's constructed of American or American system-ish players who know how American soccer works. And it's not to say that there's not value from European influence or South American or whatever, but that you need that part of the equation here. And you mentioned earlier, like we keep going here in Cincinnati back to the foreign
Right.
pool.
You
There's
can't fill every hole with that like that way.
right now there's one American player in the starting 11 for this team. And again, I'm not saying you have to have an American player, but like you look down the roster and like any of the Americans are at best depth, right? Like
Right.
Nick Hagland is in this starting 11 out of like pure luck, right? Like if you're looking at like the best 11 that's available, he doesn't sniff that 11. And I'm not saying that to be difficult on Nick. I'm just saying like look at some of the other teams and their best center backs that like that's not where Nick Hagland is. So
Right.
there's an ignoring of what makes teams successful here, and you kind of wonder if the people who are making these decisions are aware of that. And last week, Carl Linner was asked like, "Hey, is there a hot seat for any of these people?" And he was like, "Nah, everything's cool. We're happy with this." And maybe he's lying through his teeth, and he could be.
Sure.
But I don't get that feeling.
If this club this season doesn't sort it out and get itself back on track, the way that a lot of people thought they would, it would be unconscionable for both manager and general manager to survive the offseason.
I think if they finish bottom of the table again, which I mean that even seems like a big ask. Like it's so early on in the year to even like try to predict that.
But what are you seeing that's making you feel anything else but that right now? I understand it's early days, but you got to at least point to something.
Nothing that I've seen on the field gives me hope that's coming.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just trying to like give them some time to breathe through this. Like they did do a lot of movement this offseason, and this team is relatively new together. Maybe give them a little time to gel, but I've given up 5 set piece goals in one game. One game? That seems a little bit more like the headspace of the team isn't in the right spot. And that leads me to believe that there's more than what can probably be fixed by gelling alone. But again, we're 3 games into the season. Like
any, yeah, I get that. Any general manager, any person given the job of general manager, if given the resources, can go and bring in big, exciting players. Where you make your money as a general manager is how you fill in the gaps and make that work with the smaller pieces. And I feel like if there's one thing you could point at and say this has been an absolute fail over the night camp era, it is not big pieces not working out. And hey, some of the big pieces have not exactly worked out.
I was gonna say, which big pieces worked out so far?
So far, technically none. Brenner is here. He has not proven himself yet, but he's got time. It's getting the little pieces right. It's building in that depth. It's making smart transfers. It's spending wisely with your GAM and your TAM and not over and just throwing it around like drunken sailors. It's being able to mine the league itself to bring in good journeyman role players. And those are the things that this club seems completely not only incapable of doing, but almost unwilling to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're looking for your, guy who's been around MLS and has won a title with someone else, right? Like you see people trying to reach out and get like a Jeff Lorenowitz or
that was the name I was literally just about ready to say.
Right.
Like, those are the kind of guys you have to get right.
A Matt Beasler, you know what I mean? Like,
you look at a guy like Dax McCarty is like a MLS legend.
Yeah.
And every club he goes to, he fills in a need in such a way that makes that starting 11 run.
Oh yeah, it's a great example there too. Yeah, it's maybe we'll see a person like that land here in Cincinnati this summer. I maybe not. But
it's either that or we get David Luiz. It's one of the two.
One would hope. Jeff Cameron's in the mix now too, right? So.
Oh sure.
Yeah.
Where's he at these days? Stoke or QPR or something?
He's leaving Stoke and he's coming back to America according to his club. So maybe they'll be in the mix.
Hey, this state voted the way he liked it to at
I was just getting ready to say
election day. So
yeah, that's for sure.
Get right in, bud.
Let's get over into winners and wankers before we siphon off the rest of our Cincinnati listener base.
Got you a nice place in Warren County.
Yeah, right.
Winners and wankers. Let's start with our wanker. I'm gonna start with my wanker, and I thought about it today watching the Champions League, and actually it was watching before the match, and our good pal Mr. Perez making his entrance into Stamford Bridge, and reminded me that not only was it him at Stamford Bridge, hanging out, still probably living in the delusionment of the Super League, but he is technically backed by the fact that not only Real Madrid, but 3 other clubs have technically not left the Super League yet.
Yeah.
Which is kind of insane that so it's Madrid, it's Barcelona, it's Juventus, and it's I'm blanking on the 4th team, but
it's Milan.
Milan, yes, AC Milan. Those 4 teams are technically still part of the Super League.
I know, but if you think about it, it's broke club, club that is used to being the bully in Europe, and broke club. Like
no,
we don't know for sure that Madrid are broke, so let's just rope them into their bullies in Europe as well. Like, I'm not at all surprised that those are the 4 teams that are left.
Like we're multiple weeks out. I know it feels like yesterday, and it's the ripples are still hitting us from the whole Super League fallout. But all this time has passed. Everybody has washed their hands of the situation. but not these 4 clubs. They're still hanging in it. And if you listen to the old Perez there, hey, it's still game on.
Good for him. I'm sure
Yeah.
that'll work out.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wanker this week, I'm staying in the same general category.
Really the 3 clubs. Because obviously Perez, we already know that guy sucks.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm staying in the same category though myself. I'm going with the Glazers. I don't need to beat up on them any more than we really have early on in the show, other than to say I found out this week that in the 16 years that they've owned the club, their ownership, the Glazer family, have never met with the Manchester Supporters Trust. 16 years, no meetings with the group who represents their fans. That just seems to be a complete indifference for the culture that you bought yourself into. And I just that really like struck me. Of all the things that I heard about them, that's the one that really got me like, oh God, that is bad. Like, it's bad.
The opposite news to that is that Chelsea announced that basically the supporters trust will have basically a representative on the board.
Yeah, I saw that. Is it an actual representative on the board, or are they just like coming to the board meetings?
I think they're just like part of the board meetings and conversations. I don't think they actually hold like
a seat.
Like obviously they're not a held position at the club, right?
Yeah.
But the whole like supporters trust pitch owners association thing, like it is kind of a convoluted thing at Chelsea. Like I didn't even fully understand what most of it meant until like recently when I like this whole Super League thing popped up. I actually had to like read like, wait, so the pitch owners thing, like these shareholders actually like own the stadium and the naming right? What?
Wait,
John
what?
Terry's the president? What?
Yeah, weird stuff. Yeah. Anyway, who's your winner this week?
My winner on Wisconsin. Jesse Marsh, Wisconsin's finest. I want to say Racine, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
If that sounds correct. Dude, getting the big call up, getting the RP Leipzig gig. I'm super excited for him. Hopefully it goes well. Yeah, it's just super cool that a American manager is going to have a prominent managerial role in Europe. And not to knock Bob Bradley, but like he's earned it in a way where like there's not like an audible gasp when that hire was made.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I think most people across Europe were like, that was a good move right there.
Oh man, what a good move there.
And he's been groomed since his days as a New York Red Bull assistant under Gerard Houllier. Right. That's how far back like that investment from the Red Bull organization goes into him. So no, I would agree with you. I think I've long kind of maintained like Jesse Marsh, Greg Berhalter, Bob Bradley. Like that's our trio of like our actual respectable elite level head coaches. And Jesse to me has been for the last few years undoubtedly probably the head of that pack. If I could have picked who my men's national team coach was, I probably would have picked him over Berhalter, not just because I have an affinity towards Columbus, but also because I think Jesse was probably the better manager at the time, but he had just taken that gig as then RB Leipzig's assistant coach, which would then land him in the Salzburg Red Bull job, which has landed him back where he is now. And full credit to him, he's done a great job. And it's just awesome seeing American land that type of gig.
If by some miracle Tottenham's in need of a manager again in like 2 seasons, like how good would you feel if that was the call they make?
I'd be happy if he was linked to it now. I'd feel better about it than any of the current ones.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Who do you got for your winner?
Yeah, I'm sticking with an American coach for my winner this week. I'm going to Philadelphia's Jim Curtin, not just because he got a big pair of wins in the Champions League to see Philadelphia pass Atlanta United, but also because he had the baller quote. So Gabriel Heinze, the famous Argentine player who's now the coach at Atlanta United, was pretty salty in the aftermath of getting knocked out of the cup and was talking some jibber jabber. And Curtin came back with this amazing quote. He goes, he's a great player and a great coach, but you can still be a loser and an asshole after a game. Just get it, Jim. Just go right for the jugular.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's some shut up juice right there.
Oh man, and that will endear him to Philadelphia sports fans in a way that I just can't really quantify. So yeah, good on you there, Jim. So that brings us to the end of this week's show. Thanks as always for tuning in. It'll be a bit of a doozy since we had a week off, but hey, I'm sure you guys are in for 80 minutes with me and Jeremy.
I mean, that lawn's not going to mow itself, so
Certainly
listen to something.
Yeah. As always, if you want to get a hold of us, Jeremy's at Jeremy Lance on Twitter. I'm at Wrong Side of Pond. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon.
Later.